Good evening, everybody. This is the March 14th, 2019 meeting of the North Andover Board of Health. I'm Dr. Frank McMillan, Chairman, and I'm calling the meeting to order. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll dispense the meeting minutes are not ready for approval? No. Okay. We're going to go right into new business. The North Andover Board of Health is a regulatory body that's required to hold its meetings in public. We have a regular meeting schedule, and this is an additional meeting called at the request of the Planning Board to provide the Health Board's advice on matters that they may wish to consider regarding the turf fields project. The Planning Board has primary responsibility for the turf fields project, and we do not have jurisdiction over the review of this project. At this point, we will only be honoring their request to provide advice. I recommend that public comments be directed to the Planning Board at their next scheduled meeting on Tuesday. So with that, we will open the new business item. Brian, can you tell us what we have in our packets here?
So, per the request of the planning board, obviously we're here to discuss artificial turf fields and any potential health effects in our expertise and opinion on the data and research to date. So what I've done is I've gone through and done as much research as I could over the past couple of days and given you information from the EPA, Department of Public Health, the New York Department of Public Health, and the California Department of Public Health as a good round synopsis of all the research and papers that have actually been done and published so far. So I do have in your packet an email that I submitted to the planning board back on January 28th, basically summarizing a really brief opinion back then, which they did bring to their public hearing on this project, and they requested more information and a more formal opinion by the board, which is why we're here.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to start with any particular item?
It's up to you, whichever one you want me to start with. We can start going through the research and the data.
Why don't we start doing that?
So this dates back a few years, and the state started looking at this over 10 years ago with various questions. One of the letters in there is from the Department of Public Health to the Needham Board of Health back in 2008. There is another subsequent letter in there that Michelle actually gave us tonight from the Department of Public Health, Bureau of Environmental Health back in 2015 to the Medway Board of Health. And I mean, we can go through all the different data points, all the research, all the studies. I think they're all pretty consistent and pretty clear in what they say. As of right now, I haven't found anything that indicates a significant risk by the turf fibers or the crumb rubber if they're properly constructed and maintained.
Can you comment on some uncertainty that has been in all the reports that we've discussed?
It is, the EPA started a study a while ago. Their original synopsis in interpretation of the data was there was no significant risk. They have started a multi-year study that is still ongoing. They did close out the public comment period of this multi-year, multi-agency study.
Excuse me, I'm having trouble hearing you, sir.
Now, is that better?
Thank you very much.
Sure. A multi-year study that just closed out for public comment on February 25th last month. So that article, or that report is being written as we speak. The data has not been published yet.
Okay, so it's not available. Why don't we just go through the local Massachusetts Department of Public Health recommendations, and we can go through the advice that the state DPH has given to individual cities and towns.
Okay. So the latest and greatest from the state is a fact sheet from the Department of Public Health here, artificial turf fields, dated February of 2019. So this just came out a few weeks ago. It goes through the different aspects of what ATFs are, what they're made of, what the chemical components are in ATFs, and what the concerns are. So they basically go through the crumb rubber, the nylon or polyethylene turf fibers, the rubber or sand bases, as well as the chemicals included in those. And basically what it comes down to is when they produce tires, tires use natural and synthetic rubbers. In that, there are VOCs, PAHs, SVOCs, and other petroleum-based compounds that are considered carcinogens. They do go through and look at the different elements of the manufacturing of tires and the manufacturing and how they produce the crumb rubber at various tire facilities and tire plants. What they state in here is, to date, scientific research largely has concluded that adverse health effects from using ATFs are unlikely. Obviously, there are still studies going on, but everything right now points to that as their conclusion, just from this one basic fact sheet. They talk about things such as injuries, they talk about bacteria, and things like that as well in this particular fact sheet.
And are there some common mitigation strategies that we should be considering?
There are different types of things that towns or municipalities can do when they install these fields. One of the things they talk about is using something other than crumb rubber, which is obviously made from recycled tires. They do talk about using a TPE, which is a type of a plastic versus a rubber. One of the things they also talk about in terms of heat stress and the temperature in the fields being higher is using a lighter colored TPE and lighter colored turf to help reflect some of the solar radiation, and things like that.
Can we open this up to other members of the board? Anybody'd like to make any comments?
Also in this report from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, it says, while crumb rubber infill contains potentially harmful chemicals, the concentrations are generally below levels of concern. Now, the information package that we received here, because this is important, was several days ago. And as Frank noted at the beginning of the meeting, we are to render an opinion based upon our expertise. We've had this just a couple of days. I've referred to the expertise of the regulatory agencies, such as the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Having said that, however, we can go over this information in more detail, and we will do in the course of the meeting, because we want to allay any fears and concerns that you may have on this. Personally, I don't like crumb rubber. I like natural grass fields. But that doesn't mean that there is a problem with crumb rubber. We'll talk about that further during this meeting here.
I just have actually one question about do the plastic-based turfs have any lead in them as compared to?
I don't believe so. I believe since they are constructed for the specific purpose, they can control what actually goes into the manufacturing of the TPE. So, pretty straightforward, I think.
And when he says TPE, he's talking about, and I'm a chemical engineer, he's talking about thermoplastic resins, and there are other types of resins that can be used other than thermoplastics, but that is a main type. And when you say crumb rubber, what is crumb rubber? That is finely ground rubber from tires, and certain impurities are taken out of it. So I want to assure that there's no misunderstanding on that. And there are pros and there are cons. A con that I see with crumb rubber is that it's black. Black tends to retain heat. There are studies that show the temperature on the fields outside. Well, there's one study from Brigham Young University was as high as 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know if that's a real study or not. I'm just reporting what I read over the last couple of days. TPE tends to be a lot lower, and it comes in different colors too. For example, white is not as hot as black. Rubber is black. TPE can be different colors. The problem that I see with artificial turf and I'm not speaking with and to you as an expert, I just don't like the temperature. It can really be hot. And even if you put water on it, it evaporates quickly. And within a very short period of time, literally minutes, the temperature of the artificial turf can markedly increase again.
There's one thing that I found that was very useful from the New York State. This is the one that's information about crumb rubber infilled synthetic turf athletic fields. And it's actually the page 7. And it gives a nice summary of information with regard to crumb rubber infilled synthetic turf athletic fields. It basically divides it into areas of concern, and it addresses what's known and what's not known, which is, I think, what we're going to really be discussing. Heat stress, Joe touched on this. Surface temperatures can reach levels of discomfort and can contribute to heat stress. This warrants consideration when making decisions about installing and using. While watering synthetic turf briefly reduces the temperature, a number of factors may influence effectiveness. People using these fields should be advised to remain hydrated and seek relief from heat in shaded areas. And then it goes on to talk about injury. Overall, studies have not found consistent differences in injury rates between natural and crumb rubber-filled athletic turf. Infection, skin cuts and abrasions may result from contact with athletic fields, and they're subject to infection. Athletes and others who develop skin abrasions should clean the wounds and seek prompt medical attention. Athletes should avoid sharing equipment, razors, towels, soap, and other objects with others because these can spread germs. Latex allergy. Not aware of any latex allergy resulting from contact with crumb rubber or synthetic turf fields. Chemical exposures. Results from several studies suggest that the potential for chemical exposure is low. Further studies by the federal government are underway to fill data gaps and decrease uncertainties. And then the last one is certainly a concern. Analysis from California and Washington State have not found support for cancer associations. Various exposures and risk assessments do not support a cancer risk, but at the same time, we want to be cautious and take mitigation matters whenever possible. From what I read, there's a difference between indoor and outdoor because of the ventilation, and that may be more of a concern with indoor, and it seems that the answer is make sure that the ventilation is good.
Yeah.
Other people?
I mean, I feel like I've spent some significant time going through the information that was provided to us, as well as my own research, and I find that it's hard to find really significant research to make a decision on. So I think we could go back and forth over the research that's out there, because it's limited and the studies are limited, and I don't know how scientific some of them really are. What I really found powerful was what the Massachusetts Department of Public Health said, which is that they don't endorse consumer products and they can recommend ways to minimize possible exposure. And I think, you know, that's kind of what I would recommend some of our conversation is about today, is how do we, what do we provide to the planning board based on being the Board of Health that helps to do that, that helps to minimize, you know, possible exposure based on the chart that Frank just went through.
Other comments, Daphne? Not at this point. All right, there are some other things here. There was a letter to the, is it the Bedford Department of Public Health?
Medway?
Medway and Needham.
Medway and Needham. I think I saw something from Bedford as well.
That was a Bedford Board of Health, just draft opinion,
Okay, all right.
when they were looking at it. That's the conclusion that they came up with.
Right. That was in 2012.
Yeah.
But the most recent one we have is from February of 19, which is the Mass Department of Public Health.
Correct. And I think one of the things they're looking at is obviously these, crumb rubber has these chemicals in them. I think what they're looking at now and what California has done is they were supposed to have their report done already, but they extended it to do additional observations and to do additional testing. what they're looking to do is actually mimic the exposure pathways. So to get any type of chemical contamination or any type of chemical poisoning, there has to be a pathway for the chemical to get actually into your body. So either inhalation, digestion, or contact and absorption through the skin or like the eyes. A lot of people get chrome rubber in their eyes, and they want to know what the situation is when that happens and what the exposure pathway is. And that obviously, as you guys know, comes down to the chemical makeup of the product that you're looking at, as well as how it can leach out of that particular product. And that's what they're looking at and testing now. All the evidence so far indicates that these chemicals, although they're in crumb rubber, they don't leach out significantly. And even going through some preliminary tests of, scientists have done some digestive studies where they mix stomach acids and push through crumb rubber and see how it leaches out into the existing acids and different solutions that they use. So right now, they haven't found anything that indicates any significant risk, even through ingestion. So skin contact, ingestion, inhalation, they haven't seen a large uptick in chemical contamination in all of their subjects right now.
So where is our best focus on understanding and accepting that there are some uncertainties? How can we best advise the planning board to mitigate those risks?
I think just in drafting your opinion, obviously the information is coming in on a regular basis. There's still some studies out there that haven't been completed yet. I think adding that into your opinion to the planning board would probably be in your best interest.
When I was reviewing this information, I said to myself, well, I'm sure in this packet here, there is the other side. And sure enough, I'm looking at an article given to us over the last couple of days by a resident here in North Andover. It's a testimony of Dr. Diane Zuckerman before the Maryland House of Delegates, the Appropriations Committee, on the health risk of artificial turf. And in the report, she says there is clear evidence that the materials used in synthetic turf can cause cancer, skin irritation, contribute to obesity, and other health issues. I saw it coming. You can always find another side. I can recall when I was in a Boston Latin School on the debate team, the moderator, and I said, look, there's always two sides to everything. The moderator says, okay, we'll talk about good things, say, of Mussolini during World War II. And I said, okay, everyone had a job. There was not civil insurrection, not until the end of the war, and the trains ran on time. The trains don't run on time in Boston, 80 years later, incidentally. So there's good and bad. But I am concerned about this report. It's a pretty hard-hitting report. What she says here is true, but what we find is not at the levels of detection. It's not there. So it gives me doubt about the validity of this report. The report that we received from the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment says verbatim, exposure opportunities would not be expected to result in health effects. Look, they're the experts. We aren't the experts. We just had this a couple of days ago. That's what the California board says. We have information here on New York board. We have information here on the Mass board. They all say the same thing. If there is I haven't read about one person that has, even though I hate artificial turf, I haven't read about one person who has been hurt or has had adverse health effects because he or she was on artificial turf. If you look inside our bodies, the level of detection, you'll find every element and compound literally known to man. It's there. That's how sophisticated instrumentation is right now. So I'm concerned about this report, but the concern that I have about the report here from Dr. Zimmerman is really not that great. And I'm sure we'll find other reports like that, too. but I'm going by what the state regulatory agencies have said.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the materials that were presented? Okay. So I think at this point, we've been asked to consider this material, and we should probably come up with some recommendations. So I actually like the way that the New York State just structured it. So I think we should consider that they consider the opportunities for heat stress and shielding or shading.
Concerned about lead, too.
Right.
You want the lead to be, what's that number, less than 100 ppm?
Yeah.
Brian?
You can get certified materials
Yeah.
for low or no lead concentrations.
Yeah.
I think the studies that they did a while ago.
High as
it was
4,000.
before- Yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't really realize that
Yeah.
some of the products they were ordering
Yeah.
from international vendors probably weren't low or no lead certified. So now that they've actually detected lead concentrations in some of the fields, historically, they've gone to recommending low lead and no lead certifications.
Right.
I think that is definitely something that should be in your opinion.
To digress this a moment, Brian, why don't they just have grass there? What's the problem with grass?
Take the words right out of my mouth.
Does anybody know? What's the problem with grass?
I wasn't
You see
asked
this
that
artificial turf along the
I wasn't
sides
asked
of
that
roads and
question.
so forth, and it's just awful. Absolutely awful.
It's been downhill since the Brady Bunch.
Yeah?
All right, so heat considerations,
Yeah.
composition of the crumb rubber, we would ask that they use all diligence to get the best product available. If that's,
definitely.
if that's even what they go with, if they go with something else.
Excuse me, I would shy away from crumb rubber as much as possible and go to a thermoplastic type of material.
Okay.
Do we have, well, before we do that, do we have information enough to make that recommendation? Are there downsides of thermoplastic?
I haven't seen any. That was the recommendation from the state on 2 separate occasions for reducing heat stress and things like that.
Do we know that that was actually implemented, or was that a
It
recommendation?
was a recommendation. I'm not sure if it was implemented.
All right. Well, I think we should ask that they consider using something that doesn't retain as much heat, if that's a possibility.
Yeah.
There are some plant-based I read about as well, so it does seem like there's developing, there
Yeah.
are developing options out there, so I think our recommendation should be that they do see what options are out there as they continue to develop.
So use their diligence
Okay.
to,
Incidentally, the only reason that I can see going to artificial turf is, well, it costs more than grass, but maintenance is very low compared to grass. So there must be a monetary aspect to looking at artificial turf.
I haven't reviewed the numbers.
Nor
for
have I. I
funding.
haven't seen them.
well, we haven't really been asked to address
Yeah.
that.
No.
But it's certainly a consideration, is a background.
Yeah.
I mean, it costs money to maintain grass. It takes time to get it to grow. You can't use it immediately.
But it will last forever if you take care of it.
Yeah, but you have to put chemicals on it to take care of it, so
Yeah.
I guess pick your poison.
No pun intended.
Do you think we should put something in about considering just grass?
It's their project. I think they asked us to
Just for the
address the turf issue. So I think it looks like we're coming to a consensus that we're going to basically recommend mitigation wherever possible, given that there's uncertainties. You know, we don't have evidence of harm, but that doesn't mean that there isn't. So mitigation wherever possible and feasible.
I mean, I do think we should acknowledge that we currently have these in town. So I know we're not commenting on that, but I think as the, Board of Public Health, it does seem like there's quite a few other communities who, it was the Board of Health who made these fact sheets and distributed them widely. I don't know if we have those available in North Andover, but I would recommend that's maybe a follow-up action item for us, is whether or not artificial turf is used on the new fields. It exists in town and has since 2004. So I think it makes sense for us to take what has been done by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health and make that widely available to our community.
I think we should mirror what the state says. We don't endorse a consumer product. This is not an endorsement. It's basically, it's a review of what's available, understanding that there is holes in the data, and that where there's uncertainty, mitigate them whenever possible.
Okay.
So can you just read us back what we have so far? I want to make sure that we don't forget anything.
So obviously, we're going to mitigate wherever possible and is feasible. Use low lead or no lead products. Going to research TPE and alternatives. I'm going to follow up with some action items, and we're not going to endorse this as a consumer product, but just understand that there are holes in the data, and it's their choice as to which direction they go, what products they use.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
A lot more comfortable with grass, but yeah.
Put Joe's dissenting voice in there.
Okay?
All right. I need a motion. You can have Brian read it, but I need it to come from a member. Say, move Brian read the motion and then make that motion.
I make a motion to have Brian read what we're recommending.
To submit the board's opinion to the planning board for their next public hearing.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Let's go ahead and make the submission.
Okay.
There being no further business before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.